The morning was perfect. The kind of morning where the air feels fresh. The sky is painted with streaks of gold, and the still water looks like polished glass. It was the kind of morning that begged you to forget your worries and just enjoy life. And that's exactly what I intended to do. I had waited weeks for this. After endless paperwork, phone calls, and meetings with the county office, I finally had everything in order: the deed to my property, the survey maps, and most importantly, the water rights to the lake. That lake wasn't just a pretty view from my backyard. It was legally mine. My land, my water, my rules. So there I was, truck backed up to the boat ramp, lowering my modest little fishing boat toward the edge. The sound of the winch clicking, the soft splash as the boat kissed the water. Pure music to my ears. I could almost taste the peace and quiet that was waiting for me out there in the middle of the lake. No phone calls, no work stress, just me, the water, and the promise of a good day. But peace never lasts long when there's an HOA around. Just as I was loosening the last strap, I heard it, sharp, fast clicks against the pavement. Heels. Expensive heels. And then came the voice. You. Stop right there. I froze. Not because I was doing anything wrong, but because the tone was so aggressive it felt like I was about to get arrested for a crime I didn't commit. I turned slowly, and sure enough, there she was. Karen, the infamous HOA president. Now, I had heard stories about her. Neighbors warned me she was controlling, obsessed with rules, and loved nothing more than flexing her tiny bit of power over everyone in the community. But until that morning, I hadn't experienced it firsthand. And wow, the rumors didn't do her justice. She came stomping down the ramp, her sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, clipboard tucked under her arm, and an expression that screamed, "I own you." "You can't launch that boat here," she snapped, pointing her perfectly manicured finger at me like I was some delinquent teenager sneaking onto private property. I set the strap down and looked her dead in the eye. "Actually, I can. This lake is mine. I own the rights, and I've got the paperwork to prove it." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. The HOA controls this lake. Always has. Always will. You can't just show up and dump a boat in our water." I almost laughed, but I knew it would only make things worse. Instead, I calmly reached into my truck and pulled out a folder. Inside were the official documents, stamped, signed, and sealed by the county clerk. I flipped it open to the page that mattered most. "This isn't your water," I said evenly. "This is mine. My property line runs right through here. And so, do my water rights. You don't get a say in what I do on my land." Her face twisted like I had just spoken another language. For a second, she actually looked speechless. But Karen wasn't the kind to back down, not even when faced with cold, hard facts. "Let me tell you something," she hissed, stepping closer. "You think a few papers are going to stop me? I've run this HOA for 10 years. Nothing happens on this lake without my approval. Nothing. And if you don't move that boat right now, I'll make sure you regret it. Now, here's the thing. I could have ignored her. I could have just shrugged, finished launching, and motored away. But there was something about her arrogance, the way she truly believed she was untouchable, that lit a fire inside me. So instead of backing down, I smiled. "Go ahead. Do your worst." Her face turned red. She yanked her phone out of her bag, dialed a number, and barked into it. "Yes, police? We have a trespasser. He's trying to launch a boat on HOA property. Yes, it's urgent. Send someone right away." I couldn't believe my ears. Trespasser? HOA property? This woman had just completely ignored the legal proof I had shown her and decided to escalate the situation to the police. I leaned against my truck, arms crossed, and watched as she continued her dramatic performance. She described me like I was some dangerous criminal, said I was armed with a boat, whatever that meant. She even threw in words like aggressive and uncooperative, painting a picture of a hostile confrontation that simply didn't exist. But here's the thing about lies. They unravel fast when the truth is documented in black and white. When she finally hung up, she smirked at me. 10 minutes. That's all you've got before they haul you out of here in cuffs. I didn't flinch. Then I'll wait. And wait I did. Standing by my boat, the sun glinting off the water, I almost wished I had popcorn, because deep down, I knew something Karen didn't know, or maybe refused to believe. The law wasn't on her side. It was on mine. And when those flashing lights pulled up in the distance, I was ready. The sound came first, distant but unmistakable. The wailing cry of sirens, slicing through the calm morning air like a warning bell. My stomach tightened, not from fear, but from the sheer absurdity of the situation. There I was, standing beside my little fishing boat, document in hand, when two patrol cars came rolling down the road toward the lake. Their lights flashed red and blue, bouncing off the water's surface, turning the peaceful lake into something that looked more like a crime scene. Karen, of course, stood taller than ever, arms crossed, her smug grin plastered across her face. If smugness were a weapon, she'd have leveled me on the spot. Finally, she whispered to herself, like a queen awaiting her knights. Now you'll see who's really in charge. I didn't move, didn't panic. I just leaned against my truck, watching. I knew the truth was on my side, but that didn't mean I wasn't curious about how far she was willing to go. The first officer stepped out of his cruiser. He was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of guy who looked like he'd seen just about everything. His partner followed, younger, scribbling something into a small notepad. Karen wasted no time. She stormed over, waving her hands dramatically like she was calling in reinforcements during a battle. Officers, thank goodness you're here. This man is trespassing on HOA property and refusing to leave. He's dangerous, he's uncooperative, and I demand you remove him immediately. The older officer raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed with her theatrics. He turned to me. Sir, can you explain what's going on here? Gladly, I said, reaching for the folder I had prepared. I pulled out the neatly organized papers, my deed, the survey maps, and the official county documentation confirming my water rights. I own this property. This lake, including this boat ramp, is mine. I'm launching my boat legally. The HOA has no authority over it. The officer took the papers and began reading them carefully. He didn't rush. He didn't dismiss me. He read every line like he knew the situation could get ugly if handled wrong. Meanwhile, Karen hovered over his shoulder, trying to peek, her face twisting with disbelief every time his eyes moved down the page. The younger officer stepped closer to Karen. Ma'am, when you called dispatch, you said this man was armed. Where's the weapon? Karen blinked. Well, he's armed with a boat. The officer blinked back. Armed. With a boat? Yes, she snapped. It's dangerous. It's trespassing, and it's against the rules. The young officer looked at her like she just claimed I had a tank hidden under the dock. He jotted something down, but his face said it all. This wasn't adding up. Finally, the older officer closed the folder and handed it back to me. His expression was calm but firm. Sir, you're fine. Everything here checks out. You're launching your boat legally, on your own property. You've got nothing to worry about. Then he turned to Karen. His tone shifted, no longer professional but edged with irritation. Ma'am, you need to understand something. This man has every right to be here. You do not. And calling in a false police report wastes our time and taxpayer money. Karen's jaw dropped. What? No, that can't be right. The HOA owns this lake. We always have. The officer shook his head. Not anymore. According to these documents, the water rights are his. That makes this his lake. Your HOA doesn't have jurisdiction here. Karen sputtered, her face red as a fire hydrant. But, we've been managing this lake for years. We built docks, we held events, we charged fees. And you did all of that without owning the water, the officer replied. That's a problem, not for him, for you. For the first time, I saw something in Karen I never expected. Fear. Real, genuine fear. The kind that comes when the ground beneath your feet starts to crumble, and you realize you've been standing on nothing but borrowed time. She tried one last desperate attempt. Officers, you don't understand. If you let him do this, it will ruin everything. He'll destroy the community. The officer sighed. Ma'am, what ruins communities is people abusing their authority. You made a false report. You accuse an innocent man of a crime he didn't commit. That's serious. Karen's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked like a fish out of water. Ironic, considering we were standing on the edge of a lake. The younger officer leaned in. If I were you, I'd stop talking before you make this worse for yourself. And just like that, the show was over. The officers gave me a nod. You're free to continue, sir. Enjoy your day. Thank you, officers. I said, sliding the papers back into my folder. I didn't rub it in, didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The look on Karen's face was enough. As the patrol cars drove off, leaving behind silence and a stunned HOA president, I turned back to my boat. The sun was still shining, the lake still calm, and the day still waiting for me. But as I lowered the boat into the water, I couldn't shake the thought. If Karen was willing to call the cops and lie through her teeth to stop me from launching my boat, what else was the HOA hiding? And that's when I saw it, far across the lake, a cluster of docks, boats, and a sign that read, Marina Rentals, HOA Managed. A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. The story wasn't over. Not even close. The lake had gone back to silence after the police left, but inside my head, things weren't quiet at all. I launched my boat, pushed it gently into the water, and started the little motor. The hum was steady, the waves rippling out behind me as I steered toward the center of the lake. Normally, this is a part where I'd relax, maybe throw a line in and wait for the fish to bite. But instead, I kept glancing toward the far end of the shoreline where something caught my eye. From a distance, I could see wooden docks stretching into the water, boats bobbed gently in their slips, ropes tied neatly to cleats. A sign stood high above it all, HOA Marina Rentals. That's when it hit me. The HOA hadn't just been flexing their fake authority for fun. They were running a business. And not just any business. They were renting out space, charging fees, and making money, all on a lake they didn't even own that I cut the motor and just drifted there for a minute, staring at the marina. Each dock represented dollar signs, steady income, and years of control. Suddenly, everything Karen had said earlier made sense. It wasn't about me launching a simple boat. It was about power, about money. The HOA wasn't angry because I broke some rule. They were angry because I was threatening their golden goose. Later that afternoon, I tied up the boat at my own property and walked over to the general store where the local fishermen usually hung out. A couple of guys were leaning on the counter, sipping coffee, talking about the morning's catch. Say, I asked casually, what's the deal with that marina on the far end of the lake? One of them, an older man with weathered hands and a sunburned nose, chuckled. That marina? Oh, that's the HOA's little money pit. They've been running it for years. Charge residents crazy fees just to tie up their boats. Some folks pay hundreds a month. Hundreds. I raised an eyebrow. Yep. Another man chimed in. Storage fees, launch passes, rental permits, you name it, they charge for it. And if you don't pay, you don't use the docks. That's their rule. They even fined a guy last year just for tying his kayak without permission. I shook my head slowly. So it was true. The HOA wasn't just playing neighborhood cop. They were cashing in. And they were doing it all illegally. That on my way home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. My lake, my water rights, my land, and yet the HOA had built docks and businesses on it, like squatters setting up shop in someone else's living room. That night, I spread my papers across the dining room table. The survey map clearly showed the lake boundaries. The water rights document spelled it out in plain English. Exclusive rights to manage, use, and control the waters of Lake Madison. That was my name on the line, not the HOA's. If the HOA had built that marina without owning the water, it meant they were operating entirely at my discretion. Every dollar they collected, every contract they signed, every resident they bullied into paying, technically, it all belonged under my control. I leaned back in my chair, a slow grin spreading across my face. Karen thought she was powerful because she had a title and a clipboard. But I had something better. The law. And the law was about to flip the script. Over the next couple of days, I kept my cool. I didn't confront the HOA right away. Instead, I visited the marina quietly, just to see it up close. The docks were in good shape, the slips were nearly full, and residents were happily using facilities. Well, happily might be a stretch. Most of them looked like they were tolerating the situation more than enjoying it. I struck up a conversation with a man untying his pontoon boat. "Nice spot you got here," I said. He snorted. "Nice? Cost me an arm and a leg. The HOA bleeds us dry for these slips. But if you don't pay, good luck finding a launch anywhere else. They've got the whole lake locked down." Locked down. That phrase stuck with me. Because the truth was, they didn't. They only thought they did. And soon, everyone was going to find out. By the time I got back home, my plan was already forming. I wasn't just going to prove Karen wrong. I wasn't just going to reclaim what was mine. I was going to take the very thing the HOA prized most. Their marina, their moneymaker, their pride and joy. Karen wanted a war over the lake? Fine, but she picked the wrong opponent. Because in the end, she didn't just hand me the upper hand. She handed me the entire deck of cards. The following week, the HOA board held their monthly meeting. Normally, I wouldn't have bothered showing up. I wasn't the type to waste an evening listening to arguments about lawn heights, mailbox colors, or what shade of beige fences should be painted. But this time was different. This time, I had leverage. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a modest building with fluorescent lights and fold-up chairs. When I walked in, I could feel the atmosphere shift. Heads turned, whispers started. Some residents gave me nods of support, while others just looked curious. But one face stood out above all the rest. Karen. The moment she saw me, her eyes narrowed into slits. She was seated at the head of the long table, her clipboard stacked with papers, like a judge about to pass sentence. The rest of the board members sat on either side of her, most of them avoiding eye contact with me. "What are you doing here?" Karen demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. I walked up to the table calmly and placed a thick folder right in front of her. "I'm here to clear up a misunderstanding. A big one." The room fell quiet. Karen crossed her arms. "You have no business here. This meeting is for HOA matters only." "Oh, this is very much an HOA matter," I replied. "You see, your so-called marina, the one you've been charging people to use, isn't yours. It's mine, because it sits entirely on my lake." Gasps rippled through the room. A few residents leaned forward, eager to hear more. Karen scoffed. "That's ridiculous. The HOA built that marina. We've managed it for years. It belongs to the community." I opened the folder and slid the documents across the table. "Not according to the county. These are the water rights. They say very clearly that I own and control this lake, which means every dock, every slip, every rental permit you've been issuing has been illegal." The board members glanced at the papers nervously. One of them, a middle-aged man with glasses, picked them up and started reading. His face paled. "Karen, he's right. The water rights aren't in our name." Karen shot him a glare that could have melted steel. "Don't you dare take a side." I leaned in just slightly, keeping my tone calm but firm. "This isn't about sides. This is about the law. And the law says I control the marina. You've been operating on property you don't own, and you've been profiting off it. If I wanted, I could sue this HOA for every dollar you collected." That got their attention. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One even whispered, "We can't afford that kind of lawsuit." Karen slammed her hand on the table. "This is outrageous. You think you can just walk in here and take everything we built?" I smiled. "No, Karen, I don't think I can. I know I can, and I already have the paperwork ready. You can either sign the marina over to me voluntarily, or we can let the courts drag this out. Either way, the outcome is the same." The silence that followed was deafening. Residents sitting in the back started murmuring, some even nodding in approval. They were tired of the HOA's stranglehold, tired of Karen's power games. Finally, one of the board members, a woman with kind eyes who looked like she'd had enough of Karen's bullying, spoke up. "He's right, Karen. We've been charging people for years on something we don't even own. If this goes public, it's not just the HOA's reputation on the line. It's ours. I won't be part of that." One by one, the other board members nodded. Even the man with glasses set the papers down and said quietly, "We don't have a choice." Karen's face turned crimson. She looked at me, then at her own board, realizing she was outnumbered, outplayed. Her voice trembled with fury. "You'll regret this." I leaned back, gathering up my papers. Maybe, but at least I'll regret it while owning a marina. Within a week, the transfer was official. The docks, the slips, the rental operation, everything the HOA had built on my lake was now under my control. And Karen? She didn't show her face at the marina again. The paperwork was signed, sealed, and filed. Just like that, the marina that had once been the HOA's pride and joy was now mine. The first Saturday after the takeover, I drove down to the docks early in the morning. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The water shimmered like a sheet of glass. For the first time since moving here, I felt like the lake truly belonged to the community. Not to Karen, not to her board, but to the people who loved it. When I arrived, there were already a few residents standing around, their boats tied neatly to the slips. Normally, this was the part where they would shuffle nervously, waiting for Karen or one of her board members to come around demanding fees, checking permits, or threatening fines. But that morning, things were different. I stood on the dock and called out, "Good morning, everyone. I've got some news to share." Heads turned. Conversations quieted. Even the kids chasing each other along the shoreline stopped to listen. As most of you know, I continued, this marina was being run by the HOA. They charged you fees, fined you, and made you feel like you didn't belong on your own lake. Well, those days are over. This marina is now under my ownership, and starting today, things change. For a moment, there was silence. Then a voice from the crowd called out, "Change how?" I smiled. First off, no more outrageous fees. If you want to store your boat here, you'll pay a fair price, enough to keep the docks maintained, but not a dime more. Second, no more harassment. This is a place for families, fishermen, and anyone who wants to enjoy the water. And third, anyone who was fined by the HOA for using these docks, consider those fines void. You don't owe them a thing. The reaction was immediate. A cheer went up from the crowd. A man in his 60s actually clapped me on the back and said, "Finally!" Someone stood up to them. A mother with 2 kids smiled through tears, telling me how the HOA once threatened to tow their little paddle boat because it wasn't registered properly. The atmosphere felt lighter, freer, like a weight had been lifted off everyone's shoulders. People began talking, laughing, even planning their day on the lake without worrying about who might come storming down with a clipboard and a list of rules. And then, of course, came the question everyone wanted to know. What about Karen? I chuckled. Karen won't be running this marina anymore. The board signed it over. And as far as I know, she stepped down as HOA president. A wave of relief passed through the crowd. Some people even shook their heads in disbelief, like they never thought they'd see the day. For me, though, the victory wasn't just about owning the marina. It was about the principle. Karen and the HOA had tried to bully me, lie about me, even drag the police into it. They believed they were untouchable because they had a title and some neighborhood power. But in the end, the law and a little persistence proved them wrong. As the morning went on, I watched families set out in kayaks, kids casting fishing lines, and neighbors chatting on the docks without fear. The lake felt alive in a way it never had before. It wasn't just water anymore, it was freedom. I leaned against one of the dock posts, watching the sunlight sparkle across the surface. Owning the marina wasn't something I had planned. I just wanted to launch my boat that morning to enjoy a peaceful day. But sometimes life throws you a fight you didn't ask for, and if you're willing to stand your ground, you come out stronger than you ever imagined. Karen tried to take away my right to use my own lake. 10 minutes later, I owned the very thing she valued most. It was poetic justice. And as I watched my boat drift gently against the dock, I realized something. This wasn't just a win for me. It was a win for everyone who'd ever been pushed around by an HOA that forgot its place. The lake was mine. The marina was mine. But the victory? That belonged to the community. This is Try Next HOA Stories, where homeowners fight back and justice always finds a way.